I was halfway through a cheap instant coffee when the ceiling split like paper, and the night dropped a woman into my life. Glass fell first, sugar bright, fatal in the wrong breath, and then she hit the attic floor in a knot of limbs and silver lymph, the smell of hot metal and rain. My mug exploded beside her foot. The coffee scalded my ankle, and my most heroic thought as a 24-year-old bachelor in a rented studio over a pawn shop was, "Don't step on her." "Hey, hey!" My voice came out soft, the tone you use to keep a stray dog from bolting into traffic. I crouched, palms up, fingers open. "Are you hurt?" "I'm here." Her eyes found me. Not human eyes. They refracted the bulb's cold light like water over stone, and then they corrected. Pupils cinching, irises settling into a borrowed brown that lied badly. She was stunning in the way lightning is stunning. Beautiful, obvious, and clearly not for touching. She tried to sit and failed. Shards ground under her shoulder blade. I slid closer and offered my hand. She stared at it like it was a contract. Then she took it. Her fingers were cooler than mine. They trembled, small, controlled quakes. I eased her up, one arm braced behind her back, and that's when she touched my wrist with 2 fingertips, just above the pulse. The air seemed to lean in with her. Her stare slid past my face, past the ruined rafters, as if she was tuning a radio only she could hear. She went quiet. "You're calm," she murmured, almost offended by the data. "Trying," I said. And it was true. Panic is expensive in rooms with this much glass. I pulled my jacket from the chair and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her like a friendly animal. The collar brushed a cut on her jaw. She didn't flinch. I found the old towel I used for paint spills and cleared a path through the safety snow to the cot by the dormer window. She took a careful step. Wavered. I steadied her. I did not look at the faint sheen moving under her skin, the way a ripple crawls under ice. Water. The thought finally fired. I grabbed the dented kettle, filled it from the tiny sink, lit the single-burner stove I'd installed against 3 building codes. Steam rose. The attic blinked with its usual flicker, city grid acting up again. The river battery's turbines had been silt-choked since the late storms, and everyone pretended the brownouts were part of a new, sleep-friendly schedule. Down on the street, a drone taxi muttered past, late-night fares arguing about surge pricing. A courier board glowed over the bodega. Need riders, pay per drop. Cycling in 3 languages. Ordinary noises, a cover song for the impossible happening in my room. I brought her a glass first, then tea. She sniffed the mug, skeptical. "It's chamomile," I said. "No caffeine. Good for settling." Another look at me, one notch less wary. She didn't drink. She held the mug like it warmed something besides hands. There was a long strand of her hair caught in a cheek cut. I hesitated. "May I?" She nodded without moving. I freed the hair. Slow, picking out glittering dust with the edge of a napkin so it didn't bite. Up close, her face did a strange thing. Details refused to sit still. For a blink, her cheekbones sharpened, her mouth thinned, like a mask adjusting its fit. Then it all softened back, human again. She noticed me noticing and said nothing, which was somehow worse. "What's your name?" I asked, because Planet of Origin felt rude. A pause, as if she was scrolling for something appropriate. "Leah Ray," she said, each syllable placed like glass on velvet. "I'm Ethan," I said. The name felt plain between us, like handing her a pocket knife while she was a meteor. I sat beside the cot, not crowding her, not retreating. I set the tea on the crate I used as a table. My tripods leaned like tired skeletons against the wall. The 3D printer blinked a red error LED, out of filament again. I breathed, counted in 4s like my therapist taught me, back when I had insurance. The attic air smelled like dust and my poor choices. Leah watched my chest rise and fall, almost fascinated. Her fingers found my wrist again, pulse under skin. I let her. In the reflection of the dark window, I looked like a man holding still for a wild thing. She whispered, to herself more than to me, "You're not calculating return." I frowned. Return? Exchange. Compensation. She blinked down to the tea, the towel, the jacket around her. Humans have this kindness, without calculation. I wanted to say we absolutely calculate. Likes, looks, leverage. But the truth was simpler. You fell into my house. And you. Leah tilted her head, listening to my heartbeat like it was a broadcast. Did not issue terms. I thought of one. Don't bleed on the sketchbooks. A tiny smile. It moved across her face shyly, like it had to ask permission from the rest of her features. She tried the tea, winced at the heat, tried again. I watched a muscle in her throat flutter as if my room's gravity differed from hers. The wind picked up. Rain rat-tat-tatted through the gap in the roof she'd made. I dragged my old canvas drop cloth over the hole, set a toolbox on the edge to keep it down, taped the corners with a roll meant for sculpture armatures. The city pulsed beyond the dormer. Delivery bikes with glowing boxes, ads blooming on the tower faces. Earn more hours, sleep later. A shuttle dragging a tail of mist toward the hospital pads. The underlights of a patrol drone combed the alley. I flipped off my floor lamp without thinking. Habit. The kind you learn when you're poor and the patrol's ticket windows like they're stealing. She noticed. Hiding? Landlord, I lied. The truth hovered unspoken between us. I didn't know who might follow a woman who fell from the sky. I returned to the cot and sat, not touching, close enough to mean it if she needed me. The kettle hissed again. I poured another mug and set it on the crate in case she burned through the first. Her breath evened. Mine answered. We just breathed. Two animals in a storm. Something clicked. I felt it first in the way my shoulders stopped nodding, a small internal detent falling into place. It wasn't thunder. No violins. Just a warm hush. The kind of quiet you get under a blanket as rain breaks open the outside world. Leia exhaled like she'd been holding it for a very long time. I thought this planet would be all noise. It is, I said. Sometimes we make little rooms where it isn't. She nodded. Trust at takeoff speed. That a saying where you're from? She looked at me for a heartbeat too long. The smile fell away. Where I'm from, she said slowly. You don't take off without permission. I could have asked what she meant. I didn't. I poured, handed, breathed. My jacket settled heavier on her shoulders, as if it decided to stay. Her hands warmed. The shaking eased. The glass glittered less like a trap, and more like stars a broom could move. I realized I was cataloging her micro-movements, the way I cataloged lenses at the pawn shop downstairs. A habit of paying attention to fragile things. Ethan, she said, test driving my name. You're calm because you choose to be? Because panic's a magnet. I gestured at the patch job over the hole. And because you look like you've had enough of alarms. She set the mug down, then surprised me by matching my posture, elbows on knees, hands loosely linked. She copied the breath, too. In. 4. Hold. 2. Out. 6. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. I am recalibrating. To what? Her eyes lifted. No mask this time. To you. Outside, another patrol drone banked, sweeping light across brick, catching the dust in brief galaxies. Leia's fingers tensed, then relaxed. Something in her training said, stand, report, obey. Something in her right now said, stay. Are you in danger? I asked. It felt like asking if the ocean was wet. Yes, she said simply. But it's quieter in here. Then we'll keep it quiet, I said, and I meant it like a promise I had no right to make. She studied me, not my face, my wrists, my hands, the little scars on my knuckles from shipping crates, and one ill-advised rooftop party. She touched the white line by my thumb. Cost of kindness? Cost of being clumsy, I said. Kindness just costs time. Leah tried out a second smile. It fit better. She looked up at the patch of wet drop cloth and the stars it hid. On Z, she stopped, recalculated. Where I'm from, we audit time. Every breath belongs to a ledger. Sounds exhausting. It is efficient. The word landed like a metal coin. My kind of efficiency is fixing the kettle so it doesn't sputter, I said, and not letting you sit in glass. That is inefficiently sweet. Don't call it that, I said, grinning despite myself. I have a reputation. With whom? Mostly with my plants. I gestured at the basil wilting heroically by the window. They depend on me for chaos. She watched the little leaves, then very carefully reached out and straightened the droop of one. It didn't fix the plant. It fixed something else. In me, I think. Proof she could be gentle with a world that wasn't built to obey her. Rain deepened, a steady drumming. The building clicked and settled. The printer flashed its error again like a patient with a complaint. I should have called someone. I should have documented. Instead, I wrapped a blanket around the edges of the cot so the draft stayed out. I put my back to the room and my face to her so I could see if the tremors returned. Ethan, she said, if I sleep, will you remain? Yes. No exchange? None. The words settled between us like a third pillow. She eased down on the cot, closing her eyes not like humans do, drifting, blinking, but like a door sliding into a seal. For a moment, the ridges at her temples shimmered through the disguise like phosphor under skin, then smoothed. My jacket slumped, absurdly proud of its new job. I sat on the floor beside her with my shoulder against the crate, listening to her breath knit itself into a human rhythm. I didn't know who she'd angered, or what rules broke when she fell. I just knew there was a woman in my attic who listened to my pulse as if it were a map, and I was very suddenly willing to be cartography. Outside, the rain outlasted the ads. Inside, the warm hush held. And under my skin, something old and ordinary, something that doesn't ask for permission, clicked on. Morning found the attic smelling like wet dust and chamomile. The rain hadn't stopped. It had organized. Bands marched across the city in clean military lines, drumming the drop cloth, making the pawn shop sign downstairs hum like a tuning fork. Leah sat on the edge of the cot wearing my jacket like she'd been issued it. She had borrowed my boots, too. They were 2 sizes big and made her look, for once, breakably human. We should retrieve the module, she said, as if discussing groceries. Where? In the old park woods by the river wall. I bounced. A tiny wince. Twice. So we went. The stairwell coughed us into a gray morning. Delivery bikes stitched neon trails through puddles. A maintenance crawler inched along the curb, vacuuming leaves and candy wrappers into its square belly. On the tower across from us, an advert for a sleep pod franchise blinked. Pay to nap, minutes from peace. Leah watched the letters like they were a new constellation. I popped an umbrella. It was the cheap kind with ribs that remembered every storm. We walked under it together, because there was only one. My shoulder brushed hers. I angled the canopy so the windward edge poured on me, not her. She noticed. On Zaria, touch is a promise, she said, eyes forward. Here. Sometimes it is too, I replied, hoping my cheeks weren't as red as they felt. We cut through the Saturday market, rows of tarp tents, mushrooms grown in coffee grounds, Battery patches, black market charger bricks, hacked to pretend they were safe. A midwife bus idled at the curb, pink decal faded, offering prenatal consults and debt plans. Leah's gaze slid over everything with professional speed, taking inventory of a planet's compromises. At the park gate, the face scanner was dead, and the gate hung open. The city had let the woods go mostly wild to save money, then sold naming rights to 3 corporations and forgot whose name it currently had. Mud greeted us like an old friend. I offered my arm. She took it. The simple weight of her hand changed how I moved, like carrying a full cup. "Here," she said, after 100 paces. She crouched and pressed her palm to the ground, the way she'd pressed it to my wrist last night. Residual surge, 12 meters. We found the module wedged in a tangle of storm-bent oak, a blackened almond the size of a bathtub and twice as stubborn. Patches of its skin still shimmered with a geometry my eyes refused to track. Other patches had been scraped raw by branches, revealing something like bone and something like woven light. "Is it alive?" I asked. "It was," she said. "Now it's a very tired machine." We worked without a script. I passed her the tools from my backpack, pliers, pry bar, a multi-driver that rattled with bits I never labeled. She unsealed a panel that didn't have a seam a second before, fingers moving with lazy certainty, and the fat blue pulse of its core looked back at us, slow and annoyed. "Incompatible rails," she muttered. "We'll need to graft power from your world." "From my pickup," I said, because of course the ugliest thing I owned was about to become the keystone in a transplanetary fix. We hauled the module like a reluctant pet through mud and briar and the last of the rain's temper. Once, the umbrella flipped itself inside out and died a heroic death. We didn't stop holding it. We just let the ribs break while we kept walking. At the street edge, I keyed the old truck. It beeped in a tone of apology. Inside, the cab smelled like oil and a decade of dinners I swore I didn't eat in a vehicle. I popped the hood, coaxed the battery clamp that always pretended to be rusted, and ran cables to a makeshift junction Leah built out of bus bars and quiet profanity. She worked fast and precise, every motion a solved equation. I worked messy and stubborn, every motion a negotiation with something that didn't want to move. We met in the middle. "Incoming discharge," she warned, flattening her palm over the module's skin. "On 3. We didn't get to 3. The air snapped. The module spat a spear of white sound. Pure reflex shoved me between it and her, shoulder to the blast, jacket catching the light like foil. For a fraction, the world smelled like burning coins. Silence after. My ears rang. Leah was suddenly very close, breath quick, not quite touching. I hadn't realized I'd put a hand on her shoulder until I felt the heat there, damp from rain, alive in a way that felt like danger and didn't. She stared at me as if the inside of my mouth were a sunrise. "Human, what are you doing to my body?" "I'm burning up," she said, half whisper, scandalized and curious all at once. "What are you doing to mine?" I said, then wished I'd said nothing because that sounded like a dare. The pause stretched. Rain beaded on her lashes. The forest dripped in slow applause. She took a breath that disciplined itself halfway through. "Touch is a promise," she said again, softer. "I know." My voice came out lower than it should have. "We can promise smaller things too, like not getting electrocuted." Leah blinked, recalibrating. The corner of her mouth tucked inward to hide a smile and failed. She turned to the module. "Small promises then," she said. "You coax. I guide." We fell into a rhythm. I sorted the power rails on the truck's innards, with the same stubborn tenderness I saved for bad machines. Leah ran diagnostics, fingers hovering over the module's skin without touching. The way a violinist tests a note in the air, before bow meets string. Every so often her sleeve brushed my forearm and my heart reprogrammed itself to her tempo. "Who taught you to do this?" I asked. "Fix things with whatever's at hand." "Hierarchy taught me to command the right hand." She flicked me a glance. "Command is slower than kindness. I am revising." I thought of the umbrella, the way I'd angled it, the stupid pleasure of standing in the wet to keep her dry. "Revisions look good on you," I said, because I was 30 seconds braver in rain. A sparrow landed on the truck's mirror and scolded us. Farther off, a rail car hummed toward downtown, its windows flashing faces. People en route to shifts, to naps, to court dates. The module's pulse deepened, color shifting from police light blue toward ocean. Leah nodded. "One more graft." She passed me a cable. Our fingers touched. The flinch we both didn't do trembled through the cab like a cord. "Promise," she said, holding my gaze. "Promise," I said, and meant something we hadn't named. We connected the line. The module woke with a low mammal sound and a ring of white script that circled its core, symbols running and falling like breath. Leah's face changed in that light. Not the mask slip, something else. The engineer replaced the officer. The exile replaced the engineer. For a second I saw, naked and unbriefed, how much she wanted not to obey. "Status?" I asked, to keep from reaching for her again. "Diagnostics nominal. Locator quiet." She swallowed. "We have a window." "Window for what?" "To decide who I am when they arrive." The adult pull sat between us like a third body. We worked in it. We didn't name it. When the discharge meter climbed again, I did not shield her. I waited. She pressed her palm to my sternum and moved me 2 inches left, saving both of us from being idiots and making every nerve I owned file a noise complaint. "Ethan," she said, businesslike and breaking, "do not take jumps for me without data." "Copy," I said, because the language of orders tastes better when it's protecting someone you want to kiss. Her laugh was quick and almost invisible. We sealed the panel. Rain thinned to a mist that felt like breath. I killed the truck's engine, and the sudden quiet held our shapes inside it like a photograph. "Hungry?" I asked, because my hands needed something to do that wasn't her. "I can metabolize your bread," she said, which was the least romantic sentence ever uttered, and somehow made my chest heat. We ate under the patient hood, sharing a napkin. I watched a crumb cling to her lip and reached without thinking. She caught my wrist, eyes dark. The touch lasted 1 heartbeat and an opinion. "Promise," she said. "Small," I agreed, even as the promise lifted its head, and wasn't small at all. We loaded the module into the truck bed, wrapped it in a tarp printed with an ad for last year's city marathon. Leah smoothed the plastic like she was tucking in a child. The rain stopped pretending to be rain and became steam, lifting off every surface. The day had the washed look of a city after a close call. On the drive back, she rode shotgun with her boots braced on the dash, my jacket zipped to her chin. The radio picked up a weather service loop and a traffic fine reminder. She watched my hands on the wheel, as if steering were a language she wanted to be fluent in. "On my world," she said, without looking at me, "people are leaked only what they need to function. Touch, warmth, words, measured. And if you want more, you petition. A breath. Petitions are rarely approved. Here, we improvise." I turned onto the alley that led to the shop. "It's messy. It's ours." Leah nodded like she was agreeing to a treaty with gravity. "Small promises," she said again, and the way she said it lit the cab from the inside. We bumped to a stop. The city exhaled. The module hummed low and content. I killed the ignition and sat there with both hands on the wheel until the feeling in my chest was something I could carry upstairs without dropping. We were soaked and muddy and tired and alive. Adults, pulled by a force our worlds had measured wrong. We didn't say the word for it. We let the promise breathe. By evening, the grid gave up pretending. The lights in the hallway hiccuped, coughed twice, and exhaled into dark. My printer died mid-whine. The kettle's indicator faded to an ember. Somewhere below us, Mr. Gallo cussed at the slot machine on his phone as it froze with 3 cherries half swiveled. Outside, the towers bled their ads down to standby ghosts. The city felt like a stage after the show. Wires showing. Backdrop slack. I set the candle on the crate. Its small circle of gold turned Leah's borrowed jacket into something priestly. The module in the corner kept its own heartbeat, a faint pulse through the tarp, like a cat asleep under laundry. "Scheduled outage?" she asked. "Unscheduled by neglect," I said. "They'll say it's load balancing. It's really budget triage." She nodded, as if incompetence translated fine between worlds. She sat cross-legged on the cot, my boots neatly aligned beside the leg like disciplined soldiers. She'd taken to tidying my chaos in little, well-intentioned edits. Angle a chair, coil a cord, and then catching herself and undoing it. Hierarchy fighting habit. Habit winning back inches. I brought a blanket. Not because she looked cold, because I needed a reason to sit close. "If the bond scares you," I said, surprising myself by saying the word. "Say the word, and I'll back off." Leah's eyes found mine in the candle's soft weather. "It scares me," she said. A beat. "But I want closer." I didn't lunge. I didn't joke. I settled beside her, so our thighs warmed through denim and borrowed fabric, and the blanket became a roof over 2 quiet animals. The rain had retreated to a far roofline. Drum now turned to brush. The whole building listened. We didn't touch more than the press of hips and shared air. We talked, not like a movie, not like a court deposition. We turned over stones and looked at what lived under them. "I was trained," she said, "to issue procedures the way you breathe. Input, decision, order, payment, compliance. Joy is accounted for as loss of focus. Here, joy is an app with a subscription," I said, and she smiled in a diagonal line that meant we'd made a bridge. I was trained to be useful and invisible. Stock the shelves. Don't ask why the price tripled. Smile like nothing is wrong. "On the ship," she said, "we call that skin quiet. You keep yours quiet even when you are noise." I breathed out. My father taught me. He did not shout. He repaired. Doors. Toasters. People, when he could. He'd set a broken thing on the table and make tea and say, "We're going to sit with this." Leah listened with her head tilted the way she did when she tuned to my pulse. "You repair me," she said. Not a compliment. A readout. "I place a kettle and sit," I said. "You repair yourself when someone finally doesn't ask for payment." Her gaze flicked to the module. "Payment arrives in other shapes," she said. She didn't elaborate. The candle crackled. The tarp in the corner sighed with its own ocean. I told her what the pawn shop smells like at opening, the sweaty coinage of a city's small failures. She told me what the launch corridor sounds like inside your bones, how the engines recite old arguments to you through the hull. I told her about keeping a basil plant alive like a dare against entropy. She told me the names her people give to heat: resource, weapon, language, lie. We fell quiet. Our fingers drifted on the blanket, mapping routes to each other that didn't spook the wildlife. "On Zaria," she said finally, "the heart is an organ of negotiation. You teach it rules. You wipe it if it learns the wrong ones." My mouth went dry. "Wipe?" "Reset. Restore to stable firmware. We call it return to clarity." "And you?" Her throat worked. "I have deviated. My overseer would call it heat bloom contamination." I didn't mean to brush her hand. I did. A simple contact. Back of fingers. the back of fingers under the blanket. She inhaled like a soldier smelling home. "I will not wipe," she said, voice small and iron. "Even if it costs rank. Even if—" She stopped because the module hiccuped, a weak strobe under the tarp. Instinct put us both on our feet. Her heat had been rising in the room in a way I felt on my skin. Now it concentrated, a soft light under her breastbone, not visible so much as implied, tinting the air. "Easy," I said, to the machine, to her, to whatever listened. "We can stabilize. We know how to do this part." Leia knelt by the module. I fetched the kit, pliers, bus bars, the adapter I'd soldered from 2 bad chargers and a prayer. Our shoulders almost touched. The candle's flame leaned toward us like it wanted in on the project. "Thermal drift," she said. "My presence amplifies it." "Because you're running hot," I said, immediately aware of how that sounded. "It is not embarrassment," she said. "It is desire." The room took the word in and made it less sharp. We didn't stop working. She guided, I coaxed. The core's pulse climbed, peaked, and then softened. A purr. I exhaled through a laugh that didn't have to be brave. Leah's mouth did that almost smile that makes light decide to stay. "See?" I said. "Tea on the table. Sit with the broken thing. It fixes if you let it not be alone." She made a small sound like agreement and grief. "On my ship, we fix by isolation. Quarantine the error. Excise. Efficiency." "How does that feel?" I asked, like being worshipped with a knife. She looked at me, apology a shadow across her cheek. "I speak too much." "You speak just right." We settled back onto the cot, the blanket now a shore we both chose. The candle had burned a well in its center. The wax made a small lake. Our shoulders touched. My breath adapted to hers. When I turned my head, we were close enough that our foreheads could meet without either of us having to cross a border. "If the bond scares you," I said again, because consent is a muscle, and I wanted it strong. "It scares me," she said, "how much I want to hear your pulse when I'm not touching you." "That's allowed," I said, ridiculous and sure. "Then closer," she whispered. I moved an inch. She matched. The blanket slid. Our hands found each other the way thirsty things find shade. Fingers laced. We stayed there with time unmetered, letting the city be a far shore with its own storms. Finally, she tilted her face, and our foreheads met. A press like the first time you lean into a wind that won't push back. The kiss didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like consent. Warm. Steady. Careful. A rehearsal that turned into the play because everyone already knew the lines. My mouth learned her restraint. Hers learned my patience. The glow under her skin softened from urgent to generous. Heat as language, not weapon. We broke with a breath and a laugh at nothing. The room somehow larger, the threat outside somehow smaller. The module's pulse evened into a working rhythm, as if we were a missing component. "Work?" she asked, thumb rubbing my knuckle like a periodic check. "Work," I agreed, because work was one of the ways I knew to love. We moved in the candle's orbit like we'd been issued this task together in a previous life. The tweaks were small, a better ground, a clip so the rail wouldn't chatter. I argued with a stubborn screw. She whispered to a subroutine like it was a skittish animal. The core stabilized. The tarp settled. The candle guttered and gathered itself. When we finished, fatigue hit like a tide. We drew the blanket higher and let our legs tangle in the democratic way of tired bodies. Leah's head found my shoulder without asking. I kissed her hair because it felt like drinking water. She listened to my chest like a scientist and a thief. "Say it again," she murmured. "What?" "That I'm safe here." "You're safe here," I said. and the room took the sentence and built a shelter around it. The shelter had beams made of my father's patience, and a roof made of her disobedience, and walls we could open when morning asked. "Tomorrow," she said, eyes closed, "we decide if we run." "Tomorrow," I echoed. "Tonight we breathe." We breathed. The candle pooled. The city, robbed of its neon, showed its real face, a tired giant turning over in sleep. Somewhere, a battery truck coughed back to life to go rescue a richer neighborhood. Somewhere, a drone landed, empty, because the person it was sent for didn't answer the door. Somewhere, a mother tucked a kid in and promised the lights would return. Leah's hand tightened on mine once, twice, like a code. I squeezed back the answer. Here. I am here. Her heat eased to a lullaby warmth. My chest loosened around its old ache. Under the blanket and the hush, the we that had appeared in the truck grew more certain legs. Not a contract, not a command. A structure of small promises, load-bearing, built in the dark by two people who had learned the price of light. Sleep took us while we were still saying yes. Dawn arrived like a held breath. The candle had died into a wax lake. The module purred. Leah's hand was still inside mine. For one long minute, I pretended the world could be convinced by our pretending. Then the room vibrated. Not sound, not heat. A pressure change that made the little hairs on my arms salute. Leah's eyes snapped open before the second pulse. "Council ping," she said. No panic, just verdict. "They have me on a soft leash. They're close." How close? She listened to air like it had confessed. 4 minutes to perimeter. I didn't have a uniform or protocol or a plan blessed by anyone who mattered. I had a truck, a stubborn streak, and a heart that had already decided which direction was forward. I stood. "We move." We'd rehearsed this without saying we had. I loaded. Tool roll, food pack, fuel can, the blanket because comfort is a weapon too. Leah killed the module's visible glow, wrapped it in the marathon tarp. She looked smaller in my jacket, not because she was weak, but because choosing had weight. Outside, the city was gray and wet and awake in the way tired cities are. Shift workers switching, delivery bikes writing the day's first sentences. I masked the truck's plates with the plastic pack from a set of canvases and a strip of duct tape. It wouldn't fool a human, but it might make a drone hesitate. Hesitation was a currency. "Across the river," I said. "There's an old flood control site. Half the cameras are ornamental." She nodded. "Launch window will be narrow." We lifted the module into the truck bed. It wasn't heavy in the way furniture is heavy. It was heavy in the way a decision is. I cinched it down. Leah climbed in beside me, boots braced, face set to a careful quiet. I turned the key. The old engine coughed, considered its age, and did me a favor. We rolled. The first drone found us 2 blocks from the pawn shop, a gray disc with a bored face and a blue mood light, patrol letters scrolled across its rim. It angled. I brought us under a bridge where the city's leakage, steam, pigeons, advertisement fog, made a little weather of our own. The drone's light sought our plates. The duct tape lied badly. Leah exhaled once, a sound you make when you decide to be yourself in public. "Permission to intervene," she said. "Granted," I said, and the word tasted like defiance and trust and something sweeter. She raised her palm in her lap, not toward the drone, not toward anything, just outward, a mandala sketched into air. The disk's blue flipped to white. It drifted sideways, indecisive, then parked itself against the bridge trestle like it was suddenly very interested in rust. We slid past. "How many are they?" I asked. "Unit of 9 plus handler." Her mouth tightened. "The handler will be her." "Her?" "My curator," Leah said. "Mother. In the way a vault is mother to a jewel." she looked at the river. She likes her things cold and obedient. She will not enjoy me. We hit the waterfront. Sunrise treated the water like a debt it meant to pay back slowly. Ferry traffic was thin. The bigger boats hadn't started their runs. I cut east along the old factories, brick faces sprung with new windows and new prices, then dodged into the thin streets where food carts slept in flocks, and the city sighed through cracked drain grates. A pair of scooters screamed by, late for something. A school bus crept in the opposite direction, half its seats empty because half the families had already moved across the river for cheaper air. Another drone. Then, two. I threaded the block and broke line of sight under the ribs of an overpass. Leah's hand tightened on my knee and left a print of heat that said the adult pull wasn't on pause. It was just wearing sensible shoes. "They'll escalate," she said. "They call it a retrieval, not a hunt. Language makes cruelty polite." The third drone cut low and bright, bold enough to be confident. I bumped the wipers. Nothing. The blades had died 2 storms ago. My sleeve did the job instead. Leah lifted her other hand, fingers splayed like she was blessing bread. The drone's light hiccuped, then sulked to a dim white. It drifted away with the offended dignity of a cat denied a seat. "Will that draw her attention?" I asked. "She's already looking through me," Leah said. "This only tells her I am capable of saying no." "Good." I checked the mirror. "Let's give her a thesis on no." We reached the old flood control site just as the sky admitted there would be a day. The access road had surrendered to weeds and nostalgia. Rusted signs warned about penalties no one still collected. The gate was locked with a chain fat enough to have opinions. I drove through the fence, slowly, because drama breaks axles. The clearing beyond was a bowl of flattened grass and old concrete, with graffiti that had argued itself into beauty. In the center, a patch of earth that felt like a secret had been told here before. I killed the engine. The sudden quiet made my heartbeat audible, and hers a harmony. "One shot," Leah said, already unclipping tarp, already all precise hands and controlled fire. After that, unknown. "Unknown's where I live," I said, and helped lower the module to the ground. Her heat rose, a visible hush under her skin. She palmed the panel, and it welcomed her like a door recognizing a hand. The core woke clean. No cough, no complaint. It rose on its own magnetics, a small moon deciding on tide. Leah's voice went low and formal, syllables I didn't know, aligning a space bigger than the clearing. The air tasted like the second before lightning. Through it, an engine note. The handler arrived by sound first, then shape. A matte black tilt van slipping down from a height it had no right to hold. No markings, but its certainty. It hovered above the fence line, then drifted inward, until we were 3 points on a triangle. The ship, the truck, us. The side door peeled open. A woman stood inside the aperture, as if she'd been poured there. Her face was smooth the way an answer is smooth. Her suit was the color of decisions. She wore kindness like jewelry. Her eyes were Leah's eyes with the warmth put away. "Asset ray," she said, and the wind carried her voice to us like a hand. "Return to clarity. Witness will be processed and erased per protocol. Minor pain. No debts incurred." Leah's chin lifted. "Curator Vesa." "Child," Vesa said, and made it sound like a leash. Leia stepped closer to the module, as if she were choosing which body to keep. "I decline the return," she said. Vesa's smile adjusted. "Decline is not a category." "It is today." Blue drones peeled from the van like spores shaken free. 9, as promised. They took positions with mathematical mercy, arrayed so neatly you could hang a sermon on the angles. My throat went dry. I looked at Leah. She looked at me, and in the glance there was the whole night. The blanket, the yes, the little promises that had grown into a doorway. "You should run," she said. "I am," I said. "Toward you." The first drone tested us with a dazzle burst. I shut my eyes and saw the ghost of it anyway. The second dove for the module. Leia moved without violence, palms out, fingers writing an invisible grammar. The drones lost their math, bumped each other like tourists in rain, then drifted sideways to study a patch of very important sky. "Leia," Vesa said, not raising her voice, "you are contracted. Your heat is an error. I will remove the error. After that, you will thank me. Gratitude is efficient." "Ethan," Leia said, and in the way she said my name, I heard the lever we could be for each other. "Help me." "Always," I said, and meant exactly that quantity. We lifted the module onto the truck's tailgate and into the bull's center point, the only square of level ground in sight. Leia keyed a sequence that looked like a prayer and a hack. The core expanded, lines of light extruding and locking into a ribcage of moving math. The air thickened. The clearing bent around our yes. Vesa stepped down from the van, the grass agreeing to not stain her shoes. 2 ground agents ghosted after her, faces so blank they felt forged. She regarded me like a catalog item returned without receipt. "Human," she said, the word not an insult, just an inventory label. "You will be refunded your inconvenience." "Keep your refund," I said. "We're busy." Vesa's gaze brushed my chest, locating my pulse in one glance. "He is the contamination source," she observed. "Remove and restore." Leia's voice sharpened. "Touch him, and the contract dissolves." "There is no contract," Vesa said. "There is now," Leia answered, and the module agreed, a ring of text unfurling around it like a signature. Agents moved. I moved too, because my body didn't ask permission to put itself between harm and the thing it loves. Vesa watched it happen the way one watches a storm, organize, irritated, impressed, calculating the damage. "Why him?" she asked Leia, genuinely curious. "He is not optimized. He's not ranked." "He's kind without calculation," Leia said, and the sentence made my throat burn. "He set T and simply breathed. He did not issue terms." Vesa considered this the way a banker considers sunlight. "Kindness is a cheap high," she said. "It leaves a deficit." "Then I'll be poor," I said. "You already are," Vesa said almost gently. "Stand aside." "No." She sighed like a teacher. "Very well." Her fingers twitched a command. A drone dove, needle out. Leia didn't flinch. She raised her hand, and every drone in the air remembered gravity for 1 perfect second. They dropped like toys. Grass cushioned them. None broke. Mercy, even now. The module hit first light readiness. A ramp unfolded, thin as a promise and twice as strong, coming to rest a foot from my boots. Leia looked at the city, then at the ramp, then at me. "1 shot," she said. After that, unknown. "Unknown then," I said, and put my foot on the ramp. "Ethan," she began. "Doesn't matter where," I said. "Only who with." Behind us, Vesa spoke a final line, something like a benediction turned inside out. "Leia Ray, return to the cage." Leia's answer was small and nuclear. "No." We climbed. The ship knew her and learned me, humming a welcome I felt in my teeth. The ramp lifted. The bowl fell away. The city became a patient map. Drones scrambled and failed. Vesa watched with her hands at her sides, the only still thing in a morning that had remembered how to be weather. Leia took my hand on the threshold. Her heat was steady. Mine matched it. We crossed. The ground stopped being an anchor. The sky accepted our correction. And somewhere between the first meter and the second, I felt the contract we'd written without paper take legal force in the only court I trust, the one under the ribs.